Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. This is a show about how artists use technology to tell their stories, and I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. We are continuing our coverage of the 97th Academy Awards today with composer Volker Bertelmann, who is celebrating his third Oscar nomination for his original score for the tense Vatican thriller Conclave, which was directed by Edward Berger. You may remember this pair worked together on All Quiet on the Western Front, which earned Volker his first Academy Award 2 years ago. Here to speak about the music of Conclave is our returning guest host, music journalist Jon Burlingame. Here's Jon.
Our guest today won the Academy Award 2 years ago for his score for All Quiet on the Western Front. He's back this year with music for another Edward Berger film, the Vatican-based thriller Conclave. His music has received one of 8 Oscar nominations for the film, including Best Picture. Welcome, Volker Bertelmann.
Thank you, Jon. Thank you for having me.
Now, you and Edward have done multiple projects together, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we have done 5 now.
Can you talk about what his attitude is about the use of music in film? If he's open to fresh ideas, if he suggests things to you, how does that relationship work at the very beginning?
Well, it's pretty much, since we've done already projects together, since then it's mostly, his sentence is mostly, let's do something new. Let's do something different, and maybe something that we haven't done before in a way. And that he specifically says, let's us doing something that we've never done before, because that also expresses his curiosity in finding, new ways. Even though he's not losing the quality, the things that are already always there and that are really good. I think he wants to find new ways of challenges. And I think that's right up my alley. I'm also a big fan of being challenged and trying to find things that I haven't done before.
So when this one came up, and it's so unique because I can't ever remember a political thriller set in Vatican City, did he have some ideas, or did he more or less present the project to you and say, what do you think?
Well, it's always a mixture of, because, when you talk about music, it's always difficult to express yourself when you're not a musician. The wording is always hard to find. When you say, oh, it's so cheesy, then, that can, let's say, create a tsunami in a composer's mind, or so you don't know exactly how to balance the words. I think what he does, and that is very nice, he in a way shows me music that he really likes. I send him ideas that I think are working very well. So maybe he sends me chorals or pieces from Bach, or he sends me, music of thrillers that he feels, or even film sequences of films that he likes. And we talk a little bit not about, can you copy that? It's much more about what he likes about that. Let's say the suspense or the instrumentation, the sparseness of it, but it does exactly the right thing. So in this case, I also heard a lot of 70s thriller music, specifically, the string work in the music that he sent me was a little bit like Hitchcock-esque a little bit, it had this tension violin vibe. I was also thinking sometimes about maybe very soon Quincy Jones thrillers as well, so there was this kind of interesting instrumentation, but also traditional. And I love actually going back in time and just looking at it and maybe interpreting things that I really love in maybe in my way, which is maybe sometimes completely, let's say, like my prepared piano that is in a way based on John Cage, but it doesn't sound like John Cage.
Since this is set in the home of the Catholic Church, you might have gone in a direction of choral music or organ music, but maybe that would have been too traditional, too old-fashioned. What was your thought about that?
Yeah, I thought that, I mean, I'm a big fan of choral music. I grew up with Christian music, like my whole childhood, my whole youth was, not, obviously I also heard rock bands and, a lot of other music, but in the church, music from the church was very present. And I obviously felt right away that I want to find something that is, presenting the idealistic world of a church or of a belief, that could be like heavenly or ethereal, or that has the kind of quality like an organ or a choir. But I didn't want to use it because when you start using a choir or an organ, you are already right in the church. So that makes it very flat, I would say, from the approach. So I tried to find something that has the same quality, and I looked at music instruments, specifically at instruments in the glass area, because I felt like the wine glass, the glass harp are instruments that might express that. And I stumbled upon an instrument that I knew already earlier in my career, but I've never used it. That was the Cristal Baschet, which is an instrument that is played with glass rods. And you put your fingers in water and you rub these glass rods, and it's tuned in 4 octaves. So you can play chords and you can play melodies. But attached to the glass rods, there are metal blades, resonators, that create a kind of nearly distorted sound. So in a way, it starts with a classy sound, but then it expands into a distorted synthesizer sound. And when I heard that, I felt like this is exactly what I want. It's ethereal, but it is also modern. It has a otherworldliness where you don't know what is this, which I think is great for a film. And so I recorded music with that instrument, and I sent that to Edward, and Edward right away said, this is really music that we want to use. We don't know yet where it should be placed, but we love it. And so it wasn't written to a cue or to a scene. It was just more like a piece of music.
Kind of texture or color that you knew would be useful someplace.
Yes, and also a melody. It had a theme that is in a way also the theme now in the whole film. In a way, the main theme of the film music is in a way that draft that I sent to him in the beginning. I composed like 2 or 3 melodies, and we chose this one as the main melodic line, and even the ending of the film is in a way based on that Cristal Baschet melody.
When you start a project, do you first think in terms of sounds and colors, or do you start right away writing themes or as you say, melodies or phrases?
I'm starting differently. I would say sometimes I have something where I feel like this is the right melody for the film. But a lot of times I need to find an atmospheric sound, a texture, something that where I feel comfortable, where I'm not already forced into a melodic arrangement. Because when you are already starting with a melody straight away, everything suddenly leans towards this. You're pretty limited. But if you work with sounds, you can actually, first of all, get the palette right with what you then write. And so I mostly search for the palette. sometimes, like with All Quiet on the Western Front, I had straight away this 3-tone melody. So that was already giving me, just with the first piece of music, everything that I needed in a way. But that is not always the case. And that's not a method that I'm using now all over again. It's much more, what might be a method that I'm using pretty much recently is that I try to find an instrument or something that is challenging for me, where I feel this could work. And I also have to find out more about it, so that I can get creatively in a different direction than with a film from before.
So in addition to the Cristal Baschet, obviously you're working with strings. It seems like a lot of the score sort of seemed string-based to me. Is that correct? And then, but it's not just, the traditional violins and violas and celli and basses. You seemed like you were honing in maybe on the darker side. Can you talk a little bit about your use of strings?
Yeah, I mean, I'm working mostly all the time with solo string players in my studio. So they come every week in the studio, and we experiment with, with this sound that we record, but we also experiment with the things that they are playing. In the case of Conclave, I had the feeling I need 2 elements. I need something that is pretty like a harsh bang in a way, like something that does like like a explosion in a way of sound wise. And I need something that moves us through the tension, that creates suspense, that creates something where somebody is investigating in a way. And so I had to find these, I used pizzicato sounds, but I recorded them pretty raw. So what I'm doing a lot of times is I let the player not play like very, very exact. I just record a lot of mistakes or noises that are in the playing. And I really love the rawness of the strings when they are rattling, or, when they just play physically stronger, which maybe a cello player would normally say, it's not the normal way I play the cello. But it's the same with, coleños, which is when you turn the bow on the backside and you hit the strings with a wood. That creates a lot of times quite an explosive sound. But we did that in the recording with 8 contrabasses or 6 cellos. And, we added the amount of strings to get these explosive sounds. Plus, I recorded a couple of layers with a contrabass player from Berlin. His name is Yair Klotman. He's a wonderful solo contrabass player, performer, and also he also writes music for film. But since my work, I would say since 4 years, he's a permanent, collaborator in terms of, adding to what I've written, adding sounds to it or adding layers. And they are sounding so dark and gritty that I really love his, maybe it's the patina that comes on top, and I love that so much.
What's interesting to me, you use the word explosive a couple of times, and it is loud on the soundtrack. When you hear this surprisingly raw and sort of dynamic kind of string sound. It's interesting to me because I think Berger uses music in a way differently from many directors. He's not afraid of it. If he wants it to be loud, it will be loud on the soundtrack, and it will make an impact. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that. It constantly surprises me how loud these sounds can actually be on the soundtrack.
Well, I mean, my feeling is that he's really feeling that music is a third dimension in a way, that it's something that adds a layer to the film. I mean, the film is already great when I receive it. I could even say, hey, you don't need me, But at the same time, if you can add something to the film that gives it, more drive, or, that heightens certain dynamic waves in a way that the film gets much more, sticks with you much more, or you can create emotional, an emotional state of mind that when you are watching the movie, that afterwards you remember with a melody, you remember, okay, that was, something that I saw already in the first scene, or, so you can in a way create links to scenes, but you can also use music detached from what you see. You can use it in areas where it's already starting to give someone a feeling that you don't see in the scene, but it somehow undercurrently starts to to rise, and at some point you suddenly realize, okay, I see, I heard something like that over there, and now I'm feeling very touched. Or you can, what I think Edward works a lot with is like building tension up, and then cutting the music pretty hard into silence, and then you are left in the silence. But the moment where it's cut is in a way very important. It's like, it's not a moment where you feel like, it can be go out here or here. It is intentionally being cut at a certain moment, and then there is maybe a natural sound where you suddenly feel much closer to the person than you felt before, because you are alone with a person in silence.
That's absolutely fascinating to me. Did you need to play Ralph Fiennes' character in any way using the music, or is the music largely driving us through, propelling us through the story?
I would say it's rather that. It's more like, and I'm not a big fan of using music for protagonists. I have the feeling whenever I'm starting to play a theme for a certain person in the film, I'm in a way feeling always forced to, the person comes in again. Oh, I have to find a new melody. But then you recognize the person has obviously, or the character has like so many different emotional states of minds that I suddenly have a whole palette of one theme. But if I then say, okay, if I have a theme for him, I need a theme for her, and I need a theme for this guy and this woman. So in a way, to not get forced into a certain structure, I rather build arcs of content. I have the feeling, for example, in Conclave, one content arc is the idealistic religious world, and the other one is the search for truth. Where we feel like they are trying to find a way of getting closer to it, and then obviously there is a kind of arc as well with all the the undercurrent, the lying, and the intrigue in certain scenes. So I think these are much more the arcs that I find interesting to build rather than to connect it with the person.
So do each of these ideas have a specific musical sound?
Yeah, they have definitely an instrumentation that does help me in the scene. Whenever I revisit a new scene that is in a way similar, I go into my toolbox and I'm like, oh, this could be intrigue, let's put it there. Or like, for example, the theme, the idealistic religious theme, comes also in play when Ralph Fiennes is when he's praying or when he's in doubt of something. But at the same time, it also comes in when, when we have speeches about religion, like these speeches in front of all the cardinals. Suddenly you hear this music. So it is a little bit like the sense of, this should be the situation how we all should be normally, but we aren't,
I'm interested in all of these different musical aspects, and I gather that you recorded at many different times and then mixed it all later into the concept that you had overall for the music. Is that right? So there's lots of recording going on all the time?
Yeah, it's, with my way of working, I think it's always a modular way of working. In the end, I feel it could be a kind of score that is written and it could be played by an orchestra. But I love actually to be able to put the focus on certain instruments and until the last minute, I could sometimes imagine that I suddenly have the violin in the foreground, even though the arrangement would say, where it is a quartet arrangement. So I take all the other instruments out and I just leave the violin in there, or I just, add them very subtly to it. So what I try to find, during the process of the film mixing and editing, the focus is always shifting. You have always the feeling that it's not in this, it doesn't stay like it was when you saw it the first time, and you have to somehow adjust that in your working style so that you're always flexible in taking things out and acknowledge that the film has changed. And so I'm a big fan also of, having music very, even in orchestra, I have layers of all the positions, like the basses are singular on a certain path, and all the rest is on a different one, and the melody is always stamped out just to have it.
But you did use an actual ensemble or two of a group of string players at different times, right?
Yes.
And where did you record?
I record at Air Studios. I recorded a lot of the stuff. I recorded also at a small studio that belongs to Abbey Road, where I recorded the last, the end credits. I recorded there the string quartet section of it. I also recorded some pieces in Budapest, at some point, because I'm also sometimes recording things in a very early state of the writing, just to get a full orchestra in the demos, just to get a feel for what size do we want, do we want to have a big size? And because I can, I have a lot of sessions where I can just sneak in a cue and see if we can just record it, and then I will have a look at it. I think that is very helpful, because then I don't judge by intuition or I really judge by listening to things.
And are you in constant touch with your director during this process? Are you offering him options or ideas, or sending him, perhaps synth mock-ups of what it is that you're thinking, or maybe the actual musical sounds?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, without having a person that is responding so quick and really listening to it, where I can feel there is somebody who listens to the music and straight away calls me, and not writing, calling. And that means like writing is sometimes nice because you have it in written form, but calling is always fantastic to talk about the content and how it can develop. And I think the communication with phone calls is so helpful in having very short discussions and describing things very precisely. And then I hang up. I mean, that can be just a call of 3 minutes, and we're like, okay, let me do this, and I get back to you. And then I send it, let's say half an hour later, I send it back and see, how do you feel about that? And then he says, oh, this is so much better. And so in a way, to get closer to what everybody thinks, that makes the process so makes it very satisfying, because we, in the end, all are happy where we went to,
You're pretty famous for your use of prepared piano. And I'm wondering, number one, you probably should define what that is for our viewers and listeners. But secondly, is there prepared piano in this score?
Yes, it is. There's also, which is very interesting, because some of the explosions, they have in a way a sound where I just throw a gaffer tape roll into the strings with a pressed sustain pedal. But when you let it drop from a certain height, it creates like this kind of weird noise. It gives it a very low rumble, but then at the end it has this chaos reverb, which also is attached to a lot of strings that are resonating. So I use that specifically on these kind of bangs. I would say I nearly have in every score somewhere a prepared piano sound. I also used the gaffer tape roll as on some middle range strings to create hi-hats, because then the gaffer tape roll mutes in a way the sound, but it gives it also like a kind of high, edgy sound, which sounds a little bit like a hi-hat, but not really like a hi-hat. And that I love these kind of experiments. And coming to your question about prepared piano, it's in a way using material that I place on top of the strings to change the tonality of that string particularly. And, that can be that I'm adding certain, like a beer bottle cap on the string, and that is rattling, or I'm adding a ping pong ball on top of the string, or I'm just putting like 100 ping pong balls in the piano and they all jump, but that creates a texture because they all move. So it's an endless source of sounds when you have, when you are searching. It offers you always something, because the piano has such a huge range from bass to the high notes. Plus it is a reverb chamber in a way when you press the sustain pedal.
It's fascinating to me, because it seems to me you're actually broadening our musical vocabulary in terms of what we've heard before in movie music.
Well, I wouldn't, some of those experiments that I'm doing are obviously already done from, let's say, from John Cage, but I think maybe I use it in a different context. I think that's maybe something. And a lot of the music that is out there that is experimental is only, known to a few, let's say, nerdy people, who really are digging into weird sounds and who are interested in it. And sometimes I was not aware that people don't know the music of John Cage, for example.
So talk to me a little bit about the end title music, which number one I loved, but which number two was perhaps more conventional sounding than the rest of the score. Why that choice? And does the end title say something different than the rest of the score?
Yeah, I mean, it's the biggest piece in the whole score. So there's no bigger and longer and more melodic piece in the score. And it was much the idea that when the film is finished, it feels like we see a few nurses, or, sisters walking over the courtyard, and there is light coming into the rooms because the conclave is done. And Edward always said when the light comes in, that's where summer comes in, and he would love to have music that is celebrating summer and lightness. And so we were looking at different pieces that we think are representing summer, and I had the feeling that if I compose a kind of vibrant, more classical piece that has a lot of string movements and brings in like a whirlwind of of lightness and light and happiness, and that might be the best way of giving people who are walking out of the cinema the feeling of something has changed in the story. And I think that also creates, obviously, from what I heard from visitors, a lot of times they go afterwards somewhere and have a drink together and they talk about the film. And I think that is one of the nicest reaction towards, towards a film where you feel like it's so nice that it resonates over over a longer time.
How does it feel to receive your third Academy Award nomination?
It's surreal, I have to say. It's also, it's wonderful. And I'm so glad that I'm being acknowledged by, my peer group, and, by also other composers. I mean, that's for me one of the biggest gifts, and that makes me very happy. At the same time, it's surreal because you don't, I'm not working for nominations. I'm working for, good films. And at the moment, I'm very lucky that I can work with very good filmmakers. And they obviously, as a musician, as we know, without the filmmaker, I wouldn't be here where I am. And so it's a lot of components in being nominated so much, where I can not be more thankful in a way to all these people that are, holding me. That's everything I feel, but that's a lot.
Well, Conclave is a very special film, and this is a very special score, and it's always a pleasure to talk with you about music. Thank you for being with us today, Volker Bertelmann.
Thank you, John.
Many thanks to Volker for joining us on the podcast today. We wish you the best of luck on Oscar Sunday, March 2nd at the Dolby Theater here in Hollywood. And of course, thanks to Jon Burlingame for conducting yet another excellent interview. And an extra special thanks to our friends at Focus Features for helping us put this conversation together. Be sure to check out Conclave ahead of the big award show. You can stream it now in Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. We'll have links, as always, in our show notes. And speaking of awards, if you'd like even more conversations with fellow Academy Award nominees in this category and others, be sure you are subscribed to Dolby Creator Talks. Many of these awards are tough to pick and predict, and we will continue to offer in-depth interviews filled with unique insights into the work of these nominated artists, which might make it a little bit easier for you to fill out your Oscar ballot, whether you are an Academy voter or simply want to do better in your annual Oscar office pool. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube, in our show notes. Or you can simply search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. If you're curious to know more about what we do at Dolby Creator Lab, head on over to dolbycreatorlab.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of the show, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Marroquin. Thanks for joining us.